Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of FFB from the 50. I'm your host Dan Amsler, and in this one we're going to do part 2 of fantasy football basics. And what I want to try to do is explain the different kind of fantasy football leagues that are out there. By no means will this cover all of the different kind of fantasy football leagues. We are typically only capped by our own imagination. There are a lot of leagues out there that are quite unique. For example, I actually commission a league where it looks like a standard redraft league. We do a live draft in person, or you could say it's a keeper league because every year we get to keep 3 players. Or you can say it's a dynasty league because the 3 players that we keep are divvied out amongst a 3-year, 2-year, 1-year contract. So at some point you may have 7 to 8, maybe even 9 people on your team. So again, we're only limited by our imagination. In this video, we're just going to cover the basics. And I want to start with a standard redraft league. And this is typically the most popular kind of league that you can play in, where every single year you go into the draft with a brand new team. So in other words, you're not carrying any players from the year prior or the years prior into it. Every year you go to the draft, you draft a new team, that's the team that you have, and then the next year you start all over again. Another one that's quite popular now is a keeper league. Now, a keeper league typically costs you draft picks to keep a player, and there's typically a limit to how many players that you can keep. So let's say, for example, you want to keep a guy that you drafted in the 3rd round. He may have been a steal for you. You would have to forego your 3rd round draft pick this year to keep that player. But let's say you drafted a guy last year like Dalton Schultz in round 11. This year that looks like a steal. Keeper leagues are quite popular, but there's another one that I like even more, and that's a dynasty league. And there are several different variations of the Dynasty League. So the one that I play in, every year you have the draft, but every year the players that you have, you can contract 3-2-1. Some leagues allow you to keep the people indefinitely. They never hit the free agent pool again. Typically what that does is it creates a draft that is full of rookies because most of the established players are already on a person's roster. The other kind of leagues that you can be in, and this is kind of interesting, I'm not a fan of this, I'm just saying it does exist, is a Superflex league. Now in a Superflex league, the flex position can actually be a quarterback as well as a running back, wide receiver, or tight end. Typically in fantasy football, the quarterbacks are the highest scoring players on your roster, so it makes sense in those leagues to grab and gobble up the quarterbacks early on. I don't like those because I feel like they give too much credence to that position at the expense of the other ones, but that is a fairly popular one that's going around right now. Another really popular league right now is called Best Ball, and that's where you draft your league, but every week you do not have to set your roster. Every week the computer will automatically select the players that scored the most points at their position for you, so it's kind of a draft it and forget it type of league. Not a fan of those because I feel like it takes away a lot of the effort that we have to put in, a lot of the decisions, and a lot of the fun that comes along with fantasy football. But if you're one of those people that are strapped for time and still want to play fantasy football, it's not a terrible idea. Draft your league in the beginning, set it, forget it. Auction leagues are another one, and auction leagues are interesting. So instead of doing a draft, players are nominated and auctioned off. So you may start with a $200 budget or a $100 budget, and you have to figure out how much you want to spend on certain players. Spend all your money up front too early, and you're going to wind up with no depth on your roster. Don't spend your money, and all you're going to have is depth, but no key players to help you out. Another one that's really popular is a guillotine or a survivor league. They're similar, so I'm going to talk about those both kind of together here at the same time. So in a guillotine league, you usually start with the number of players that you have weeks in the season. And there's a couple variations. In one, it's whoever scores the lowest points for that week is eliminated. And the other variation is whoever has the least amount of points for the season after the week is eliminated. And then their players go back into the free agency pool, and you have to bid on those if you have free agent money or place waiver claims, and you build your roster. So as you can see, if you make it all the way to the end, the rosters are absolutely stacked. Survivor leagues, sometimes those are less about the actual fantasy players as much as they are the actual teams. So in those, it's not really a fantasy football, it's more just a football betting game. But you would pick teams to win. Sometimes it's to beat the spread. Sometimes it's not against the spread. It's straight up. But typically you can only select a team to win one time. Another interesting league that is gaining popularity, or type of league that's gaining popularity, is called a Vampire League. And I think to explain this one, I'm just going to give you an example. So in a Vampire League, let's say it's a 10-person league, only 9 of the players will draft. Whoever is the vampire for the league will not be able to draft, but will be able to select their team from the existing pool of players that were left over afterwards. But here's the rub. You say, well, why would you want to be the vampire if you don't have a draft? Because if you actually beat one of the players who did draft, you can automatically force them to trade any player from their team to your team that you choose. They cannot say no, and the league cannot veto. So you can see where that could get kind of spicy. And these are not the only types of fantasy football leagues out there. They're just the most popular. Go down in the comment section. Let me know what your favorite type of fantasy football league to play in is and why. Make sure you like this video and subscribe for more. We're going to come back to part 3, the scoring settings. That'll be the Fantasy Football Basics part 3. All right, that's all I got for you this time. Until next time, see ya.